Welcome. This is Wisdom Remnant Academy, and I am your host, Miss Davina L. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about something that I was writing yesterday, and I think it's very interesting. So please take a moment, get some water, sit back and relax, get a blanket, however you want to listen to this podcast. But before we do that, we're going to listen to Motion by Jade Novah. We're in motion. We're in motion. I'm loving you off the ground. Please slow it down, baby. Don't let me We're in motion. We're in motion. I'm loving you off the ground. Please tone it down, baby. Don't let me go. Alright, so we're just going to let it play a little bit in the background. So if you hear it, wonderful. Let's keep that vibration and that motion going. So today I wanted to talk about of spirit and how they are attached to each other, or how they travel in what we call pack, like wolves, or how we can say this is legions. Demons are usually associated with being a legion type of energy signature or frequency, and they travel real deep, okay, like an entourage. So this is what I want to talk about. So if spirits gravitate towards energy centers that reflect their own frequency signature, meaning if like attracts like, for the fueling of the energy to keep it alive, to keep it in motion, I believe that without an avatar, energy spirits wouldn't have a medium to project their vibrations through. So spirits usually stick to their own kind. They reproduce after their own kind, which is the flow of nature. So when we step out of the flow of nature and how things were designed originally, we get into perversion, or we get into doing things right, but in a wrong way. People doing things that is not necessarily evil, but it's just in the wrong manner. Like I was saying, so spirits usually stick to their own kind, which grows its power, making it a stronger influence. I believe that whatever we give our energy or our spirit to, that is the power that we give to it, to drive it, to keep it in motion, to keep it alive, to keep it going. So when we create the environment for spirit to grow and become more influential in our lives, that is a real experience for that person. So I believe that when we do that, we actually do start to create energies that move in the way that we expect it to move. So we feel like there is a such thing as a demon or Satan or whatever it is. If you focus on that vibration, calling it what you think it is, then in your life, that's how it's going to show up. That's what it's going to reflect, because you are the creator of your own life, your own existence. Problem is, when we come into religion, we try to make our experience everybody else's experience. That's the wrong way to do this. This spiritual stuff is an individual experience here as God on this earth. So you're God in flesh. The word became flesh. We're all flesh. And whatever you say out of your mouth, whatever you think in your head, whatever magnetism that your heart is pulling towards you for manifestation, that is what your ass is going to get. So I believe this is why it is more evident that those that are bound to religion or suppression, anything that suppresses energy or the free will, causes possession. And possessions to me are the aggressive takeovers of spirit, because they seek freedom just like you do. They want that freedom of expression just like you do. So anyone that restricts you, that binds you, captivates you, anyone that takes your freedom to express energy is going to cause that energy to rebel. So we find ourselves going against what it is that we're taught or programmed to do, because we have now become suppressed, or the energy inside of us, that God flow inside of us, has become suppressed, and it can't move and operate freely as it wants to. So that's when the energy becomes rebellious and it starts to take over, in a sense, because you're so obsessed with expressing yourself even though someone's telling you not to. We're all here living a journey that is full of decision making, and sometimes as parents we're overbearing, and then the child steps out and becomes rebellious because they want to express, and that energy shows up as an out of control child, okay, teenager, young adult, whatever, that ends up on psycho med by the people seeking control, teachers and parents and church leaders, and they work together in a system to put children on these meds and things like that because they cannot control their child, or it seems like the child is not doing or living up to a certain expectation, and then that creates a whole different problem. But even when you think about it in this aspect, friends, enemies, boss, co-workers, boyfriends, girlfriends, spouses, and then if you have children of your own, even those children can reflect that same type of energy back towards you. Sometimes people push the boundaries because we don't even know how to set boundaries in the first place. So they push these boundaries by placing their expectations on you. Even the government system all do this stuff to control the masses. Yet we have the countless woke people who fight against crayon color illusion rather than see the more important picture. All the colors are sold together in a set or a crayon box. We are all looped into this experience together, and that's what people don't realize. They feel like once they've gotten to a certain level of existence, okay, they feel like what they know, what they've been through, what they've researched is valid for everybody in everybody's situation. And that's not true. We're only here to share information. I'm not here teaching you anything. I'm just sharing from my viewpoint what I have come to know and what works for me and what does not work for me. Prior to the Tower of Babel, all were working together as one until division and languages were invented to communicate. Okay, so the reason why languages was invented in the first place was because the mind had been set into a state of division. Do you want to take it to the Bible? You take it to the Bible. God confused language and everybody got scattered. But we were all on one accord. We were all flowing with all these, what we call now psychic powers, which is what a lot of us are trying to get back to and don't even realize it. The psychic powers within you, or the psyche, your mind power, is already within you. All you have to do is tap into it and reactivate it and reconnect yourself to the divine being that gave it to you in the first place. So the mind was divided into 3 triads, meaning 3 groups. We do this also when we talk about the zodiac sign. So none of this is separate from each other. This is just another way of looking at the same type of information. So the mind was divided into 3 triads, groups of 3. The instinctive triad is concerned with the intelligence of the mind, with basic life functioning and survival. Okay, so I liken that unto the root chakra, which is all about the transformations of your foundation. So the root chakra transformations are the most powerful way to start a journey of changing yourself, or changing of the self, to become the divine self that you are. But you have to go through trials and tribulations. And the trials and tribulations are within the 7 main chakra vortex centers. So if you work with your chakra systems, you pretty much can create a better life situation for yourself. This is why we start from the root to treat the rest of the tree. So the seed must be planted and die before you even see the fruit, and before you even see a tree, before you even see a branch, okay? Before you see a leaf or anything, it starts out with a seed. So we get to the root of the thing to treat the rest of the tree. This starting point is where you overcome your past, generational curses, and restructure your life from your present moment point of view. So you don't look to the past trying to fix the past. You're in your present moment, that right now moment, and you start to work on yourself from the bottom up. That instinctive triad creates your personal boundaries based on your sense of reality. So with that being said, you learn boundaries, or the lack of boundaries, from your roots, from your upbringing. You know what it is that you don't like and what you do like based on the things that you've gone through or seen projected in your childhood or things that you have experienced, and that create this wall around you. So you build up your defense mechanisms and things like that, and that starts from the root. So when you want to start on your spiritual journey, on the esoteric side, I would say we start from the root and go up. But when you're in church and you lifting up your hands, you're starting from your crown chakra, and then the energy comes into you and then it goes down to the root. Okay, so that's what I think happens in Christianity when we lift our hands, raise our hands, we're thanking God and doing all this, and God is supposed to be up above us. So we're pulling God down into our atmospheres without having first done any work on the self or the root. So we become a contaminated vessel that spirit or God can't really use unless you decide to step yourself out of the way and then allow God to use you. But there's no constant flow of it. You have to go into an atmosphere first before God can use them. And that's because they're out of alignment. It looks really good in church. We've seen it done all the time when we're growing up, but that's not how you consistently flow. So they tell you things like, oh, well, God don't speak all the time. That's not true. When Jesus wanted to do a miracle, because he had already spent quiet time in that secret place with his Father, getting those downloads and getting that inspiration, because he had already done that 40 days, 40 nights type of fasting stuff, he knew how to tap into it at will. So I want to express that as well, because I learned in church that God may not use you all the time. Once you start to step outside of church with your all-seeing eye, you can see the deception and where it comes from and how they did it. And you don't judge anymore in these other dimensions because it doesn't feel like you've missed out on anything, to be honest, because you have it now, always had it. It's just that the apocalypse or the veiling of the eye has been lifted, and so now you can see, and now you appreciate everything that you learned, even if it was done in a deceptive way. So when you come up in higher dimensions, you leave the lower vibration with the lower vibrational people. So you let the dead bury the dead, and which is what Jesus said. We don't have no more time to deal with what happened. We already know what happened. Now we have to move into wisdom and say, we're not going to allow that to happen again. And this is where a lot of people get stuck. They want to keep talking about slavery and how we came from here and came from here. Okay, that's great. It happened. Let's move on. What do we do now? What we do now is make sure we don't create the same bullshit that was already done. That's the whole point of coming back to this time. If we feel like we have been here before and we are here now reincarnate from our past, then that means what we have already done, we already learned, and we've already got that outcome. So now we come back here at this present moment to change the course of things so that the future will not reflect the past. So we create a new heaven and we create a new earth when we step outside of the past and dwelling on slavery and things like that over and over and over and perpetuating the same storyline. Now we have to move into being scribes and controlling the narrative. The one who controls the narrative is the mastermind that controls the mind. And this is what they have done. But this is what we are now able to do now that we know the knowledge, or now that the knowledge has been brought into the light. So wisdom and knowledge, they merge and they marry and they create the understanding. That creation of understanding, that number 3 vibration, is the Messiah energy. And so when you take on Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, okay, or as your personal self, which is your Lord and Savior, because you are the one that has to change the way you think by renewing your mind. So when you step into that frequency, you step into that flow, ego is dead, because Christ energy is a lowly, humble energy, because it is both knowledge and wisdom in one being. It is both the twin flame energies as one. That's the new creation. That's the offspring. So when father comes together, mother comes together, they create a child. We are the children that embody the whole totality of knowledge and wisdom. And when we do that with understanding and compassion, we can move into doing the impossible. The miracle signs and wonders that follow those that believe is because we've taken on the frequency of Christ, or the mind of Christ, and we have been renewed from the past. So this is when the ego carries unresolved rage, and you're most defensive about the foundations of your life when you're dealing with your root chakra. You guard yourself and your traditions, and you feel like everybody's wrong and you're right, and all this stuff that children project, these temper tantrums and stuff like that, that woke people go through, that religious people go through, all the bound people go through these temper tantrums when you do not agree with them, is because they're fighting to be accepted. They're fighting to be worthy because they have not understood their worth just yet. They have not been renewed in mind because they're still working on their chakra. They're still working over those pains and that misery and that child abuse and that sexual abuse and that domestic abuse. They're still working through those emotions. So they're on the root chakra. You're working on a lower frequency, which is also considered to be the first dimension, when you're just looking from your own perspective. I'm hurt. This person hurt me. I don't care about anything else. I just want to not feel hurt. Okay, so that's what happens when you're dealing with your root chakra. And just because you have mastered your root chakra, it doesn't mean that those vibrations or those spiritual energy signatures, it doesn't mean that they won't show up or reappear. Because this is a process where you have to be a working alchemist, working with the elements all the time, working with yourself all the time, trying to overcome yourself all the time. So this is a continual thing, but you start from the root. They started us from the crown down in church, which is great. But if there is no way for the energy to come back up, it stays suppressed. And then it falls down to that root chakra and it just goes there and it sleeps there until you reawaken it so you can realign yourself to have the energy go back up. Okay, so that's the difference between working in a religion and also working in spirituality. They have to marry each other. When you're a spiritualist, it doesn't mean you don't follow a set of rules or rituals or rites or ceremonies. They go together, they flow together. You know something, and wisdom tells you how to do it. So they work hand in hand, that you can merge and incorporate all things into all things. So working with the root chakra, if you find your energy stuck there, you usually damn everyone who doesn't agree with you. And we've seen it in church. Most church people are very, very judgmental. If they don't agree with you and what you're saying, they're going to automatically send you to hell and make you feel ashamed. And that's a loop as well, to continue to help you gravitate more towards that same type of energy so that they can keep you coming back for more and more and more and more. So that happens when you don't have a functional root chakra. And starting at the root is where you'll find the most benefit when you're working with going up Jacob's ladder to the higher dimensions, to your mind, which is your heaven space. This is where problems originate when energy is ignored. So when we talk about church, we go to church, we get the energy, God comes down, we're feeling really good, and then we don't work on the self. We feel like we've done our duty for the week. We've gone to church. God is good. I gave my offering. Now let me go and curse everybody out at work on Monday because they didn't got on my nerves. There's no work that they do. And so that is a loop that's been there forever. And we're going to continue to see it until we decide to change the narrative. We're going to take a small break. Thank you. So good at loving, deeper than living. You're my drug. Just need it right. I said that I want more. I want more. Feeling so deep like an immigrant. I taste so sweet, don't you fight to crave. Baby, what you do? I swear that I be coming back to life with you. Ain't nothing else on my mind. Ain't nobody else worth my time, my time. We be in our zone, smoking on our love. Zombie all night long, zombie all night long. Oh, no one else but you. Me, won't be on that zombie. Up all night like zombie. No one else but you. Me, won't be on that zombie. Up all night like zombie. Touch is so honey. How you keep me wanting. We don't sleep. You keep me alive, but when I want more, I want more. You so deep like an immigrant. I taste so sweet, don't you got to cry, baby, what you do? I swear that I be coming back to life with you. Ain't nothing else on my mind. Ain't nobody else worth my time, my time. We be in our zone, smoking on our love shot. Champagne all night long, champagne all night long. Oh, no one else but you. We both be on that zombie. Up all night like zombie. No one else but you. We both be on that zombie. Up all night like zombies. Waking from the bed. Don't wanna go to sleep, but don't wanna get out of the bed. Creating a monster, never satisfied until we bed. Until we bed. I'm gonna love you like it's my last breath. We be in our songs, smoking all night long. Zombie all night long. Zombie all night long. Oh, no one else but you. We both be on that zombie. Oh, all night like zombie. No one else but you. We both be on that zombie. Up all night like zombie. So, welcome back. Now that I have gotten my THC vibe going. So, talking more about the way that we were originally all whole, able to use our mental powers, which we now call psychic abilities, that are reawakened or realigned when we get on our spiritual journey, which is why we tend to leave churches and organizations and religions that bind us from using our mind. And we kind of gravitate towards religions that do allow you to tap more into your spiritual self. They still bind you into some kind of mindset of, I need to have an altar, or I need to work this magic in order for this to happen. So we still get bound, but we step it up. So that's a good thing. I always say religion is religion, and it's beautiful, and it's necessary to a certain extent, but it's still something that if you're not careful, you can get bound into. So you think you're going from one religion that suppresses your will to think, and then you go into another religion that allows you to think, but it still locks you into a system. So Enneagram reveal the psychological and spiritual truth about who we are, which can deepen our understanding of our predicament. To predict something is to predetermine a mental state. So that's what happens when you predict something. You do that based upon past patterns. So it's not something that you just pop out of the air and know. When we look from our present standpoint, which is what we're supposed to be doing, we're supposed to be beings that are living in the right now moment that can look at all different angles. That's where the angels come in to show you this is a different outcome to the same problem that you have. This is one solution. Then the angle of light comes in and this is another solution. And then once you have that all-seeing eye, a single eye, you can see all the solutions. Instead of just the duality of the situation, you can see many more ways to find a solution to the predicament that you're in. When they suppress you from thinking or developing your mental psychic ability, it suppresses you to the point where you cannot see all different angles. So they show you by media a scenario, and based upon your inability to be able to think, they already know that you're going to kick into your feelings or your emotions about that situation, and you won't be able to critically think of a solution. So this is what I believe happens when we bind ourselves to anything that restricts our freedom of energy to be expressed, or that God energy within us. And then it also keeps us in this predicament or this mental cycle of always needing to call on something outside of ourselves, because we can't think of a solution on our own with our God energy. So we have to find a solution somewhere outside of us when that's the deception. Our original identity has been divided into the three triads. The triads are important for transformational work because they specifically pinpoint where your chief imbalances are. So wherever you're really imbalanced, you'll be able to pick up on where that is when you deal with the triad. So that's why they were successful in giving us zodiac signs and broke them all up, with all these different examples, even the Bible being a tool used to predict how you would respond to life in situations. They gave some people a Bible, some people have a Quran, and they did all these different things just to make sure that they know how you would think. Well, if you call yourself a Christian, then based on this book that we gave you and how we allowed you to process it, we know how you're going to think. If you are a Muslim, we know how you're going to think. If you're into Hinduism, we know how you're going to think. So that's why they broke it up. But when you're free, you don't identify with any of these systems. You know how they work and you use them as your practice, but you don't say, I'm tied to this one religion because this is the way. So when you do that, they start to know how you think because they know the stories themselves. They use the stories. So this is what I liken to strongholds. Strongholds lock you into and bind you into a set of way of being or a set of way of thinking, a set of way of speaking. And they are usually generationally handed down. Okay? And these are energetic stagnation. So this is a suppression, is not allowing energy to be expressed, which is what we talked about earlier. These triads represent the three main clusters of issues and defenses of the ego self, and they reveal the principal ways in which we contract our awareness and we then limit ourselves. So this is what I was saying. Once you gravitate toward a label or a certain religious way of expressing your spirituality, it's a way to control because they already know what you're going to do. It's important to identify the imbalance or the stronghold in your life and then master its illusional loop so that you can overcome it. Step back with that all-seeing eye. You can see all sides to every situation and circumstance. There is nothing that you do not know when you have an all-seeing eye. Everything flows because your awareness is everywhere. And guess what? What you pay attention to is what you give energy to, what you give power to. So when you are focused on one set outcome and you're so emotionally attached to the outcome of how it's going to work, how it's going to get done, then you're giving your energy and your power over to a limit of needing to control. And you say, okay, this is the end result and this is where I am. The middle, the details, I don't want to worry about. The universe is going to give me what I want because it's my target. I'm not focused on the details. So what do we do as witches or, mystics, alchemists, whatever? We work physically doing the rituals, but we don't tell spirit or we don't tell the universe how to bring it to us. Law of attraction, right? So when you step out of being tied to a set way of thinking and being and you just flow, you won't be predictable. The Bible illustrates how a stronghold or a strong man must first be identified before you can take down the house. This helps us too. We have to first identify who is the strongest influence in the house. Is it the mom? Is it the dad? Is it a child? This is how energy works. Which one is the strongest? And that is the one I'm going to use. We see this play out all the time. Sometimes women are the more dominating ones, and it looks like she's the devil. Like, dang, man, you don't have no say-so in your own house. Well, that person is where the energy is going to go to. The most powerful influence is the one that the energy gravitates toward. Then it binds that strong influence, and then it takes over everybody else. Even in a church realm, church system or whatever, I've heard this many times by people saying if the head gets attacked, then the rest of the body will start to feel its effects. So it's the same thing. You identify the strongest influence or the strongest person that lives in a house, you bind that person up, you tie that person up, and then you're able to take control of the whole house. Starting at the top and then it flows downward. So that's the starting point. But when we have mastered that flow, then you can turn around and go the other way. So that's how we go up and down Jacob's ladder. That's how the Kundalini energy goes from the root to the crown and down to the crown, back to the root, and they do this continual dance. As long as your nodes or your meridians, as long as your vortexes are open, then the energy can flow without stagnation. And that's what we're working on. becoming clear in our energy, becoming clear of who we are, becoming clear of our past, becoming clear of our passions, becoming clear in our heart, and then becoming clear in our speech and our communications, and then becoming clear in our spiritual seeing, in our first eye, which is called the third eye, and then we become clear at the crown, where we get crowned, that crown of glory with all those chakra jewels. Those are the jewels that you get on your crown when you work through those chakras. And then Prince even told us, he said all 7, we'll watch them fall, standing in the way of love. We will smoke them all. So how do you do that? You have to know what's blocking you, and then you have to overcome it. And so that's what we do when we do chakra work. It's also what we do when we learn ourselves, our natal chart, and how the zodiac signs are in what houses and all of that stuff. This is the reason why we do that, because once we were whole, but now we're broken up into 3 sections, and that's pretty much how we get out of this loop, how we overcome this cycle that we're in. And then you come back here as an avatar if you want to be here to help. But you're not locked into karma, or the cycle of karma, or the cycle of reincarnation when you work on yourself and you evolve in the lifetime that you're in to become an avatar. Because this thing is never going to stop. We're always going to be here. But how are you going to reincarnate? Do you want to come back as somebody that still needs to learn something, or you want to come back under the influence of, I'm here to help, I know what I'm here to do, I've done all of this work previously, and now I'm here to help. How can I help? How can I serve? And that's where a lot of us are seeing ourselves now. We're seeing that we're stepping out into speaking and talking and teaching and offering services because we've done a lot of work already. I remember being here, but I believe that I was already working as an alchemist, and that's where I left off. So this is why I say that it makes no difference if you are claiming a religion or not. You can still do those same things, your rituals and altars and stuff, without claiming one set religion that incorporate those tools. It allows you to be more free. And this is what I'm working on. Total freedom. So the magical point here is to remember that a wise one first watches and observes to learn strategies before a takedown. You have first got to identify who's the strongest influence in a house before you talk about taking something down. And that is where wisdom comes in. Wisdom teaches you how to do the things that you know. You know you need to do something, but you don't know how to do it. That's mama. Mama says, okay, baby, this is how this gets done. That's why wisdom is the divine feminine energy. So in the group 1, this is more associated with the head. So this is your instinctive triad. And then in group 2 is the feeling triad. And then group 3 is the thinking triad. Group 1 being the instinctive triad is the head, space energy. That's where all of your instincts come from. Now, when you get to the second group, this is where your heart is. This is your middle space. This is your core. This is where you feel. And then the gut is actually your first mind. This is where you feel that inner knowing. So when you have that gut telling or that gut knowing, that comes from your core of knowing who you are. So that's actually documented, that the gut is actually the first mind. So when you say, oh man, I should have followed my first mind, you should have followed that gut, that nudge in your gut. And then this is how the law of attraction actually works. Your gut, or that thinking triad of the 5, 6, and the 7 of your first mind, must align with your heart center, which is numbers 2, 3, and 4. That is where you feel. And then your instincts put you into building upon all of that, which is numbers 8, 9, and 1. These are the Enneagram numbers. Instincts is still broken down into more things. The feelings are broken down into more things, and thinking is broken down into more things. But to keep it simple, this being that you are houses the 9 attributes of God, and it's broken down into triads. Okay, so I think this stuff is really, really interesting, and this all came from Spirit asking me, what is it that you want to represent? Who is it that you want to be now? And I'm like, I don't really understand what you're saying. And I was led to go to Barnes & Noble, and this is not normally a book that I would have picked up. So Spirit totally led me to this book, The Wisdom of the Enneagram, and I'm like, wow, it's a complete guide to psychological and spiritual growth for the 9 personality types. And then seeing that, I remembered in my bachelor's program, I had to work with the archetypes. Wow, wow, wow. It's all coming full circle. So now Spirit is like, you've done a lot of work on your spirituality. You've done it, girl. You've done it. You work through the elements. You'll never stop working through the elements, but you worked in awareness. So that was different. For the first time, I started noticing energy and how it was coming in my life. I started noticing spirit, and they say you've done that work. So now what we want to do is ask you, who is it now that you want to be? You have the option to choose. And I'm like, wow, that's very profound. I didn't know that. I knew I had an option to choose, if I wanted to be a spiritual person or if I wanted to just put my spirituality down and just focus on all physical stuff like having a really good job and making sure life was great. But Spirit is now saying you've done your spiritual stuff. Now you can actually start working on having a life. You can actually do that now. You've come out of being a monk and you've learned your thing. You learned everything that we've taught you. Realizing that you will always be a student. Always knowing that you have to stay humble, like you've done all of this stuff. So now I'm in a transition of going back down from heaven back down to earth, which is not so easy, but it's very, very enlightening on the way down as is on the way up. And it's always going to be a cycle of up and down, up and down. This is a journey, and we are always going to be here in some capacity. We're always going to be here. So I'm just grateful and thankful for this journey, and I am out.